Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we continue our retrospective on the Fly films with 1959's Return of the Fly. This is episode 363. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castlebridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN American Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, how are you?
Fantastic. And you know, we all lead stressful lives, and it is really nice to like relax back into discussing, some monster movies, some straight up old fashioned, I got this on my lunchbox monster movies like Return of the Fly. This is exciting.
If
Okay.
nothing else, it stops you from compulsively watching the news like I do.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. Return of the Fly is a 1959 American horror sci-fi film. It is the first sequel to The Fly, 1958. It's the second installment in the Fly film series. It was released in 59 as a double feature with the Alligator People. If you've never seen a still from the Alligator People, you got a guy in a turtleneck sweater with an alligator head, and I've got to see the alligator. This film was directed by Edward Bernds, and a big change, it is in black and white. We adored the color of the last one. This one takes us back to, it feels like night and day. It feels like a different universe to be in black and white. Vincent Price is back, and Herbert Marshall, who played the inspector in the last film, was to be back, but he fell ill, so he's been replaced by a character played by John Sutton as Inspector Beecham. And that is handled deftly through like 2 lines of dialogue. The film has yet another sequel that we will be back for called The Curse of the Fly. I am dying to know what the heck is going to happen in The Curse of the Fly. I really, truly am. Okay, so let's get our opening thoughts. We'll go Drew, Julia, Tony, and then I'll go. Drew, Return of the Fly. What do you got for us?
The Return of the Fly with Vincent Price. That Misfits song has been on loop in my head for several days. So this one obviously is a lot lower budget. It's a lot pulpier. There's there's crime elements added into it. It's got way more of the monster stuff, although I would argue that the monster makeup is much less impressive, even though we do see it more. However, I think if you are looking for a more traditional monster movie, this is probably going to be more your jam than the first one, because it's got all those elements to it. I love the sort of Sidney Greenstreet character in The Mortician, who is also a criminal of some sort.
Yeah.
Like, I love all of that stuff. I think there's still some pretty great freak out body horror, particularly when they run the dead cop through the machine and he ends up with the hands and feet. There's also some fun references to older monster movies, particularly the Wolfman. The Kane from the Wolfman shows up at one point in this movie, which I surprised that doesn't get brought up more. And indeed, I think this does fall in line with sort of the later, even though this is a Fox film, it feels very much like it could be one of the later Universal monster movies. Like, it's got a kind of vibe to it. But I still like it. I do think it's a step down from the first movie, which is kind of a sophisticated movie for a monster film. But I still think this is an enjoyable creature on the loose kind of flick. And it's definitely if you're thinking of a 50s B movie, like, you'd be hard pressed to find one better. And who doesn't love Vincent Price? Vincent Price is great in everything.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much. Julia, I know you really loved The Fly last week. So where did you land on this?
I mean, I'm with Drew. It's it's got some entertainment value and it's neat look. I like the black and white personally. But I think it's a step down too. I think that I like a lot the character of Philippe. I think he's very attractive kind of leading man type, and that was fun to have. And then, of course, I love Vincent Price always. But, I'm never a fan of all the gore. And in this case, just the stepping on the rat and just all that. I was like, no, please. So there was a lot of stuff where I was just like, oh, really? I'm not a fan of the fly makeup. I think it's a little bit silly in parts, some of the plot elements, whatever. But it was entertaining. I think it wasn't, I didn't regret watching it.
Thank you. Tony, so what are your thoughts?
So I think it was kind of strange to see, go from such beautiful color to black and white. And I like black and white. Like I like the look of this, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot different. Also, it feels like two things to me. And people, the filmmakers could feel differently. You might feel differently, but it pulls the Aliens 3 at the beginning, like, yep, she sure was. It's a shame she's dead. Okay, now here's all the new cast, and we're gonna go with that because she's dead, and then this other,
I hadn't
different
thought about
casts, all that stuff, like all the
Yeah.
things that people kind of disliked about Alien 3.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of this one. Also, by the time we get to the end, it feels like the studio or somebody going, tragedy. It feels like what a studio person might want the first film to do at the end. And that's not bad, but it feels like we can't. I mean, obviously you have to come up with a different ending than the first one. You can't just redo that. But the kind of like, phew, see, happiness. Like it feels like a note that was taken in the first one.
Yeah.
Like, we can't end it like that. What? Are you crazy? How about this? And they went, no, we're gonna end it with tragedy.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
And except for the families together by the end. Like, there's the kind of stinger where they're all there. But we use that to give us the whoops. All right, here's why we're in black and white land. She's dead and never recovered, and now we're hanging out, and I'm still your uncle, and all of that, like that gets wrapped up super quick. We're now firmly in Return of the Fly land, and here's why. And it feels like that. And like I said, but I think the creature effects are cool. It is very traditional. I think it's also interesting that as we go black and white, we also go to black and white gangland, crime drama, black and white, which is interesting and gritty. I think that it's interesting that even with the lower budget, that there were effects that were freaky enough to freak Julia out. That's effective. I mean, if it's doing that, I know but it's not fun that you had that reaction. Perhaps, Julia, but I think if on a lower budget, if you can elicit a horror reaction like that, that's kind of like that's good. So it is disturbing. I mean, they're able to disturb when they want to. It's a lot of interesting choices. I think it's. I agree with Drew. It's more B movie, monster movie. But it doesn't have quite the finesse of the first one. It's not as effective.
Funny that you mentioned the Alien 3 thing, which is you're right, but I also kept thinking about like Friday the 13th sequels where they technically jump ahead with Tommy Jarvis, where Tommy Jarvis is suddenly like a teenager.
Yes,
right. Because technically, this is supposed to be 15 years after the original Fly, which puts it in 1973, which is
oh my goodness, I hadn't thought about that.
Vincent Price looks amazing, hasn't changed.
Right.
Wow, that's really beautiful. So they experience in this universe, the Fly universe, they experience time basically according to soap opera rules, where people just magically age 15 years.
Well, yeah, soap opera rules exactly, because in the soap operas, I always say they put the kids in the attic and then they come back like 5 years later, 5 years older. And so it is soap opera rules in that Vincent Price doesn't age, nothing else seems to change, but Philippe is an adult.
Yes.
Right.
So he just went into the aging chamber and then came back out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that version of the 70s is way different than the 70s.
It's kind of
Seriously.
cooler, honestly. The cars are awesome. You
God,
know,
no, the cars are not 70s cars at all. They're like super cool. I was telling Jason that the cars in this movie are so unbelievably cool. I'm having so much fun with them. And then we watched something that took place in the 80s, and I was like, why did the progress between the 60s and the 80s mean that the cars just got really ugly? Like, what happened there where
yeah.
all the style just went out the door? All the cars in this movie are gorgeous.
Safety, probably.
I mean,
I
undoubtedly
guess.
safety.
Probably
For one
right.
thing, those fins actually were not all that safe. And I don't mean just like if a car hit you with a fin, but also, you know, all that stuff just like, you know, it's all sheet metal and it would all just get crunched in and you know, whereas by the 80s they've got other stuff going on. They've got the new monocoque bodies that are basically just a giant cage, you know? And
Right.
like, yeah, so it's all safety, but it's all boring. So so I think that's
Yeah.
the answer.
Anyway, these are
Yeah.
gorgeous cars.
But yeah, that police car that they've got with those enormous fins.
Well, and
So yeah,
and the Allen guy, whatever Ronald, whatever his name is, that guy has an awesome car. I love his car.
so I'm going to throw out a thesis and tell me, guys, if this is real or if it's my imagination. I believe this movie becomes black and white, and somehow all of a sudden it takes on, and I wonder, this might be just prejudice on my part, but it takes on a more noirish look. And suddenly we've also got criminality and gangsters and stuff introduced. And it reminds me of how in the lower budget, the creature walks among us. It was the same thing. You've suddenly got a lower budget film, and you've also got a lot more like conniving, double crossing B plot going
Well,
along.
I think that they probably wanted a faster movie than the
Mhm.
first movie. And I think they probably would have gone that direction whether it had been in color or not. Simply differentiate it from the first movie.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Jason, Vincent Price was terribly disappointed that they did this movie in black and white.
Really?
Yeah, and
He was also disappointed with the script because at first, when he first read the script, he really liked it, and then they cut a bunch of stuff, and he was like, "Well, now I don't like it anymore."
Oh,
Well,
interesting.
eventually they don't give him much to do either. And
Yeah.
that was the other disappointment, is they kind of like he gets sidelined in a way that's, you know, you got Vincent Price. Come on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But when you think
Like,
about it, it's a script, right?
tragic.
It's just words on a paper. You could make Vincent Price do any damn thing you want in this story. And instead, they have him at the beginning be like, I'm not going to support you. And Philip, you know, they kind of tussle about that. It has to do with money, it has to do with whatever. And so Price is finally like, fine. And then his character kind of, that's it. You know,
Well, and
he's
then at
like,
the end, he just shows up to basically press a button, which I'm just like, that's not
Right.
how any of this would work. Like, you would have to do some serious sciencing to be able to figure out how to separate out these DNAs, not just press the button. That whole thing irritated me a lot.
well, I mean, I don't know that you should be thinking too hard on the realism of Return of the Fly, Julia.
No, I'm just saying
Well,
they
it would
could
have
have
been
given him
good if
some
he
like
had
tech talk where he was just like, "We have to do, configure this so that blah 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 blah," some Geordie stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know.
or
Not-
figure out
I
how
mean-
to science along with the fly thing, or, you know, like work it out. That would have been interesting.
Well, that's again, that kind of reminds me of like one of the House of Dracula or something like that when we started getting into the lower, the more B movie Universal monster movies. Is like once you got to the latter half of the movie, there was suddenly like a rut. And I love those movies. Don't get me wrong, but often they feel like once they get to a certain point, there is a rush towards the ending. And this movie feels very much like that. You have the monster go on a rampage, and they just want to kind of put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. To your point, though, Jason, I think the criminals and all that, that film noir stuff. I think that is, again, they're just trying to make a pulpier, more drive-in style movie. This is like, what else is popular at the time? Detective movies. Okay,
Yes.
let's have some gangsters in this. And
right down to, they introduce a character. So just to give some waving at the plot. Philip wants to follow in his father's footsteps. Let's table
That's
that for a
Philippe
moment,
to
because
you.
Philippe, I'm sorry. We'll table that
Or
for a
they're
moment, though.
French. Did you forget that they're French? Why would you
Oh my
forget that?
They're
They're
actually
obviously French.
Montrealers, and
Well, whatever.
French Canadian.
French.
French Canadian, clearly.
Anyway, Philippe wants to follow in his father's footsteps, and he has a good buddy who's going to help him, and that good buddy is actually a big faker who is really a con artist and hangs out in his off hours with a guy named Max. And Max
He's a
is
total mob guy.
played by Dan Seymour, and he is wonderful. I mean, he is this wet-lipped, smiling, overweight mortuary owner with death masks hanging over his desk and giant palm fronds in his office. It is the weirdest, it's like he's in another movie.
That was really clever. I liked him, but I also have to say, don't just just glance over whatever the word is. Alan/Ronald, he is actually a good character, because I was completely shocked to find out who the con artist. I was like, wait, what? Because he seemed like a really good, just kind of like,
he completely
sidekick
sells
guy.
it.
Yeah. So I thought he was great.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. He's a really neat character. I thought it was interesting also, this concept of Philippe wanting, Philippe is now a grown man, getting back to Universal. Drew, I assume this is what you're talking about. Son of Frankenstein is very much the same thing. I love the way these movies talk about science. I'm going to follow in my father's footsteps. I started doing some work on it. I'm setting up a lab. This felt so much to me like a Universal movie that I was giddy watching it. It was just super fun to see.
If you had a newer version of this, they'd probably be the military. I mean, Return of the Fly is kind of that. The Fly 2, the military weaponizing, as opposed to, hey, gangsters are going to make money off of it, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same idea, but we're still kind of we're not that far. The U.S. isn't that bad. We're not that cynical yet.
Right.
It's got to be gangsters that are going to make money off of it.
Yeah, good point.
But obviously, Universal wasn't far off their mindset, because again, the aforementioned gangster/mortician has the cane from the Wolfman in his office.
So that's really super weird. I can't explain that at all.
It's not weird at all. I think that they were thinking about those older, would have been not that much older, but older monster movies from Universal when they were crafting this. They really think they wanted to make a fast, fun movie, because they wanted to do something that could be done more lower budget, but B, appealed to the sort of people that would be going to a matinee that had a double feature on it. So this one, the first movie is great. It is, but it's definitely it's an A picture, and not just because of the color, but because of the sort of script it has. Because I mean, there's definitely tons of A pictures that are black and white, and even if we're talking about Universal, like the earlier Frankenstein and Dracula movies were all fairly big budget for their time, but this is like their way of franchising it. They came up with something that they wanted to sequel out, and what's the best way to make sure that it turns a profit. It's not just going to be making the budget lower, it's also making a crowd pleaser. And I think if I was watching these movies back to back as a kid, I probably would have enjoyed this one more than the first one, because it has more monster stuff in it. It has
can see that
on the loose stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have, and I think the feel of this one, again, when we were talking about, what I thought about the first one, and up until when I actually got to see it,
Yeah.
when I was older, the feel of this one is kind of what I imagined the first one to be when I imagined it when I was younger, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like that
Yeah.
monster movie. Oh, it's The Fly. It's a monster movie this way. And I agree. I think I agree with Drew that if I was watching it on Monster Theater on Saturday evening when I was young, this probably would have been the more memorable one, other than the ending, of course, of the first one. This in general, like all the gangster stuff and the action and the the makeup and guinea pig rat guy and all of that. Like that would have, it has the flavor that I think you're right, Drew, that the crowd pleaser aspect. Now it's a shame because I think you can have both, but you make those choices along the way, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I do think, unfortunately, this movie does, when you watch them so closely together as an adult, it does suffer some by comparison because it's shot in a much more pedestrian way. Like there's nothing as there is that amazing bit where the heroine screams in the first one and you see
That's right.
her reaction and all of the different fly vision. There's
vision,
nothing that imaginative in this. You have a guy running around in the woods and it's shot pretty, it's competent, but it's not anything that I would say is artistic and even the way that the makeup is done, the fly itself, like they have this added element of gigantism. So like you have this super exaggerated fly monster, whereas like the first one,
much gianter
It's
head.
much grosser too. It's just like the mouth is so
Yeah, its big mouth
And-
is grody. Yeah.
but it's actually less frightening, maybe because
it's true. I agree with you. It's just kind of absurd.
it's cartoonish, and
Yeah.
but again, if you were a kid watching it,
It's striking.
I think you would be into that. So
Well, and in a generic sense, he goes on a rampage in the way that David Hedison doesn't really go on a rampage. But this one goes on a rampage. He goes running around the woods.
roaring
and the
rampage
police-
of revenge.
Oh, it's so
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it is. To me, the funny thing is also considering this is an 80-minute movie. So it's sort of perfect. It's sort of perfect what you want as far as, you think about science fiction double feature, The Toon and Rocky Horror. This feels like the stuff that Richard O'Brien is trying to describe.
Oh, yeah,
that
absolutely.
song,
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I gotta say though, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, no, the revenge part where they're I just kept coming back to what if it goes on a rampage like a fly? And
A murderous
Oh, okay.
brain of the murderous brain of a fly.
Right, the murderous brain of a fly. That's a hilarious idea.
Like,
Because
okay,
Yeah, I was
mean,
like,
I
who
get
are
it, but
flies murdering in your world? Because I'm not sure.
they're murderous flies in their murderous brains. I
With the
also thought that
proportionate
it must
strength
have
of a
been
fly.
really tough to wear that gigantic head. That must have weighed a ton.
Oh yes, indeed.
That poor actor,
It's
and he's
so
doing
hot.
like he does a pretty cool job of it. But
Well, I think about that as
occasionally
the-
it kind of sort of doesn't fit in places.
I think about that with
Yeah.
the people on the Masked Singer, and like sometimes they actually do kind of freak out because it's so hot and so like heavy.
Right.
It
Well, who was
does
the-
look like something from The Masked Singer. Holy crap.
Dear Masked Singer next season.
Yeah,
Somebody
you're right.
be the fly.
Have this guy come out.
Return of the Fly specifically.
He could hold a microphone in one of his furry claws and sing "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road" or something. Yeah, I gotta say
They could
though,
have Mike Pence do it. It would be great.
Because they already apparently have had Rudy Giuliani. So
One thing that really struck me as really shocking though, I was grossed out in the body horror thing when the brilliant thing, bringing in criminality, bringing in these con artists and stuff. They suddenly will do stuff that Vincent Price and David Hedison from the first movie would never think to do, like make a guy you don't like disappear by throwing him in the transporter. Like nobody would ever think about that.
That was pretty good though. I mean,
and so he gets thrown in, and then Alan is like, well, just because I'm going to be a jerk a little bit, I'm going to throw a guinea pig in there too. for no. I
No, no,
can't
no, no,
even.
no, 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 no. That's not how it went.
Okay, how
So
did it go?
they
Oh, that's
they
right.
they do
You're
the
right. I'm
they
sorry.
do the guinea pig or rat or whatever it was because they couldn't decide if it was a guinea pig or a rat. But anyway, whichever one it is, they put it in and then they go, okay, the experiment
That's
is we're
right.
going to let it set in the transporter for overnight. So
Right.
then when he put the guy in there, I was like, shit, that guinea pig's still in there. He's going to be part guinea pig. And sure
Yep.
enough, that's what happened. But what's obnoxious is why on earth he wouldn't just kill Philippe instead of deciding to make him a fly creature. That's
Yeah, but
just
wait.
fucked
Stick with
up.
the rat for a second. I want to stick with the rat.
Okay, yeah. But I'm
So
saying that was the decision is when he
we
put the
bring
fly in
back the cop that the cop who's come to arrest Alan. Alan's a con artist on the run, so he throws the cop into the transporter. There's already rat atoms wandering around inside the transporter waiting to be recreated. And so when they bring him back, you have two creatures. You have cop with rat feet and rat
Mm-hmm.
arms, and you have a rat with human hands.
there.
Oh man, that was so crazy. Like
That
that
was
was not what
so
I was
weird.
expecting,
It
and
is
that was
That was
amazing.
mind blowing.
so weird.
It's 1959, right? Okay, and somehow I don't care how unsophisticated looking it is. It sends shivers down my spine to
I
see
want to
a.
see a Hellboy-esque story where that creature survives, and it's like sitting on a desk smoking,
Yes,
like with the human hands.
yes.
Like, hey, even better if it's running the gang.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a
It's
great idea.
smoking and like,
Yeah.
and let me, and if you mess up, we'll feed you to my friend Mac the Fly, and
Yeah. Please write that down, Tony, because that's a great idea. Well, and then
Can
the
you
fact that
imagine like a gang being run by that rat with like
I
smoking?
love that idea. And to me, see, the thing is, I use jump the shark ideas like that all the time. I mean, I'm always like, what if it's a rat? I like stuff like that. That's why I have my own publishing company now, is because I can do stuff and I don't have to ask permission. But that's yes, I
Yeah, I
love that
should use
concept.
that somewhere. I guess now that I've thrown it out, somebody's probably going to use
No,
that
man,
before I do.
you'd be
But
surprised how much people do not pick up and run with ideas. So,
oh,
but Alan squishes. Oh my God,
well,
it is.
bro,
It,
too.
and we just
We
see
don't see it.
this.
That's how effective it is. That's what I love. Is like you see. I mean, they show it, but not. They
He
cut away
Yeah,
starts
he
quick
to
puts
enough.
his
squish
foot.
it.
He puts his
Oh,
foot on the rat. Then you cut away, and the rat screams.
oh,
And
gross.
then
Oh,
he throws this he destroys a piece of equipment by throwing it on the rat. And I'm just like, oh my! And then there's like this giant blood spot that he's trying to clean up. I was like, oh my god, this is horrific. It's so
Yeah, it
gross.
is.
oh man, and that is like prime. I don't really give body horror a great deal of thought, right? But it's not my number one genre. But that is prime body horror, the kind of thing that just makes you. It is horrifying to you to think of all the implications of what it would be to have a rat with human hands. That's just
Cut to years later,
great.
and scientists actually create an ear on a rat,
Well, that's true.
and so
That's
you know, I mean, totally different methodology, of course, but
Well, and I'm sure that elicited horror among people,
I mean, it
and
was
yeah,
pretty. That was a pretty intense image.
yes, indeed,
Fascinating for science, but a
yes,
rat with a human ear on its back is
right, right,
I just think about whenever they find the body of the cop, because he throws the car, he has the car dropped off in the river. Eventually some forensics guy is going to
Oh
have to deal
man,
with that, and he's going to be like, what the hell?
what the hell?
yeah,
Why does this guy
Seriously.
yeah.
have long
Or the
rat feet?
rat. I'm assuming that the rat with the human hands is somewhere too. If they found that in the car, I don't
Surely
know if
he
I didn't catch if
incinerated
he was
that
in the car.
thing.
Well, why didn't he incinerate the guy then?
I have no idea. I yeah, good question.
Because he gets
Um,
seen putting a body in that car. Whatever. I don't know.
I that's a really good point. I loved this business of pulling the body of the cop out and putting him in the trunk and throwing the trunk over the cliff into the water. I mean, all of that. And I know
And the
that Psycho's
maid
not out yet.
sees him.
Reminds me a lot of Psycho, though, of course, yes. There was something else that I was thinking about, which is all of this trouble brought on by Al. See, everything would go pretty great if it was just Philippe following in the footsteps of David Hedison, but he's got an assistant, and the assistant is why it goes bad. And that, to me, this whole idea of the assistant is very Frankenstein, even though in the Hammer Frankensteins, it's always Frankenstein who's trouble and the assistant who's sympathetic, but it's still the same thing. I need a scientist
it's
who's going
very
to follow
Dr.
me.
Pretorius, and I think
Yeah, good point.
I think that's also, I like the fact that the guy that Philippe ends up a fly monster out of human malice, of it being an accident again,
Yeah,
because that would be a little pat, I think.
Right.
it's a really good point. Yeah,
Because Philippe almost has post-traumatic stress disorder about flies throughout it, and then so what was
yeah, good point.
what is the assistant's name? I'm blanking on it at the
Alan.
moment.
We'll call
Alan.
him Alan.
When
Yeah.
he's putting him in the transporter, he sees this fly buzzing and he puts it in there, and it's such a sadistic,
Just for the hell of it.
That's so fucked up. I mean, it's
Yes.
just so mean.
The guy's evil.
Like that's
Yeah.
super evil. Why on earth? That was just that was so wrong. But then, like I was saying, the idea that Vincent Price can undo it just by putting them back in together and pressing a button makes no sense to me, unless somehow it's like that episode of Doctor Who with the I think, is it called the Impossible Child? No, what's it called? The child? What's it called? The one with the
you have to tell me
kid
more.
with the gas. Well, the kid with the gas mask from the 40s.
That's the Impossible Child.
Impossible Child. Anyway, the idea was that the nano genes, or whatever they're called, remember, like once they have a mother's DNA, they can rewrite the DNA of the kid properly or whatever. And so I'm wondering if that's what it is. The transporter just knows, like, oh, okay. Now that you guys are back in here,
I mean,
I've got the DNA straightened up. But it doesn't make sense that it wouldn't have done that to begin with. Like, it seems like it should have. I don't know. It just annoyed me. I feel like there should have been a line of dialogue about how he reconfigured.
Well, in fairness, they did theorize that might fix the guy, the original fly. So
Yeah.
I mean,
but I think they still would have done stuff.
Maybe.
Like
I don't know.
reprogram something.
That's why I think there was a lot. It was a lot more bleak. Like they hoped, but they weren't sure, and that's why,
right.
like I said, it feels like they were trying to right the wrongs of the ending of the first one, because going with what you said, Drew, where they're like, hey, this is what people want, right?
They want a happy
this time
ending.
We want a happy ending, and he gets the girl, and he's not a fly, and the gangsters are dead, and
although
all of that
I
stuff.
think I always think about what happens after the credits roll, and Philippe would be going to some therapy. And I have once more have so many questions on the way that this works, because it seems like the fly with Philippe's head had Philippe's mind, but so did the fly human hybrid too. So are they sharing a consciousness? Like, how does this all work?
I think it feels like in the first one, the two start to, like, eventually it will set. So you have X amount of time, but the fly will probably die. Like, I thought that was interesting. Like, how long does the fly live? Like, that's not good. But it feels like they have enough of each of the bits that the DNA and everything's kind of figuring itself out. And they kind of hit on that, and that's why it becomes so tragic in the first one, is he's losing those. Everything's settling.
Yeah.
And we again see that sort of repeated in the 80s one.
Yeah, the 80s one seems to have thought this through in a very different way.
Right.
So that there's
but
one
we haven't
creature.
watched that yet, so don't talk about
You're right. You know what?
But
we won't talk about
But we carry that forward, that idea of it, of the gravity, the way that the DNA is working kind of settles eventually.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of how it is. Anyway.
It's interesting, though, what you're talking about. And I know you just said you didn't want to spend too much time talking about the 80s one, but what I do find interesting about this being a sequel is I don't think of people, when you talk to horror fans, and horror fans always like, oh, I like this series and I like this series. Mm-hmm. And even going back to like, oh, I like Creature from the Black Lagoon, that was a trilogy, or I like the Hammer Frankenstein series. Like, I don't really often hear people talk about The Fly as a series, even though it totally is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't explain that at all. That's a really good point. Maybe it's because it's a 20th Century Fox movie, and Fox hasn't cultivated its.
It doesn't have the
series?
horror legacy. Yeah.
True.
It doesn't.
That's a guess. It's a pure guess on my part.
But you're right, because like Hammer and Universal obviously really cultivated that, and then the 80s and 90s you had New Line, and later
Yeah.
Dimension, who really were like, we make horror films. This 20th Century Fox was, they have a fine legacy of genre
Yes.
movies outside of The Fly, Alien, obviously, and Predator. They're responsible for some very iconic creatures throughout film history.
Good point.
But people don't really think of this as a series, even though, again, it totally
Well,
is.
and also because it's such super duper horror. I mean, when they do it right in the '86, I haven't seen Fly 2, by the way. I'm looking forward to seeing that one, but I would. I'm going to try and throw something out here. I believe actually that the more you move away from monster into horror, the less sequely your story gets, possibly, because monsters tend to be sympathetic, so even if they're the bad guy, there's something to follow there. But the more sort of horrific in a cosmic sense, the less you're overly interested in following up on the same character, the same detectives, or the same monster, or whatever it is. That's just a guess on my part. And actually, come to think of it, probably falls apart because look how many Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies there are. Can I just
Or
mention?
Freddy Krueger, of course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He was
But I just want to
completely
mention I was
unsympathetic
wrong,
character.
Julia. It's The Empty Child. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I
That
was like the Impossible Girl and the Empty
right.
Child. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Right.
Anyway, back to your
So
thought.
was
Yeah.
that whole so am I to believe that during this whole stream of consciousness about souls, you were also Googling Doctor Who?
Yes.
Way to multitask. I'm
Thank you.
impressed.
Well, the way I searched for it, like, in what episode does the 10th Doctor say, "Are you my mummy?" And
He actually
they
doesn't
were.
say it, I don't think, in that episode. That's actually a
Well,
callback.
no, you're right.
But
And then I had to go, oh no, damn
yeah,
it, it
yeah,
wasn't the 10th Doctor, because it was actually Eccleston. The 10th
right.
Doctor was just referring back, but it was the Empty Child.
Are
Doesn't
you
matter.
my mummy?
Um,
That is one of the scariest episodes of Doctor Who. If anybody
well,
wants
yeah,
to just
because the reason he's the Empty
watch a
Child
few.
is that the little nanobots have put this kid back together, but they don't realize that the gas mask is not his face. They
Yeah.
don't they don't understand that that's
I
a
think I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I think most of our listeners have probably seen that episode of Doctor Who.
If they haven't, they should.
Yeah.
Oh my
It's really
goodness.
good.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So there, like I say, there's this big Curse of Frankenstein aspect, where with needing a helper down, like Pretorius, or like I say, like Paul, because I keep thinking that these movies maybe aren't influenced by the Hammer Frankensteins, but they sure echo them a lot. I feel like there's a lot. There's
If
a lot
nothing
of
else,
familiarity
maybe
there.
it's just something the culture in the 50s and 60s,
Yes.
where I mean, obviously you had the atomic anxiety that was going on in the day, so maybe people were questioning
Yeah.
science. It's I don't know. I do think that they were, like I said, I don't think in terms of whether they were influenced by Universal, though, I don't think that Kane would be in this movie. Like 100%. Like that's too deliberate.
That's
I
the
don't
giveaway, right? That's
yeah.
yeah. Wow.
And not for nothing, also a movie about a man turning into an animal,
it's a really excellent point. Yeah.
although a much less fearsome animal than wolf.
So I'm dying to know if the next movie, I guess don't tell me. I'm just dying to know, like, how are they going to do it? Because I realize now, if you're the writer and you're like sitting around, throwing a baseball against the wall and going, how do we turn him into a fly this time? And the last time it's his gangster pal.
I think it's
wonder-
best just to experience it.
Yeah, that is.
I
can't wait.
I think it's better
'cause I have
just
not
to
seen
go
it.
with it.
All right,
Nobody, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent about this, but Curse of the Fly is a hard movie to get for a long time.
Well, and it's late, my friend. I mean, Curse of the Fly is like 1965. I mean, 1965, that's a different universe from 1959. That's post Kennedy. It's, Teenage Strangler is in 1965, and that's a different world from this. So I don't know why I picked Teenage Strangler. I'm just pointing out that that's a that's a different time. So I can't wait. Totally, that'll be a blast. I know that we've bounced around. So let's talk about any characters that we need to bring up. I
Well,
should
I
say
mean, that
Philippe.
poor little
Go ahead.
girlfriend, the the
Yes.
girlfriend of, or is she his wife? No, she's just
No, the girlfriend. It's this girl it's the Elizabeth. It's the Frankenstein Elizabeth character that he grew up with, playing in the
Cecile.
garden and everything.
Cecile's the
Yeah,
daughter of the maid, so he grew up with her, and now they date. And she just has nothing to do. She's except scream occasionally. It's so
yeah.
sad. I'm like, this is the most boring character. But whatever. It wasn't about
Mhm.
her.
You're right. The funny thing is, all you had to do was make her. She could be the daughter of the maid who's back from like medical school or something. And then she could
She
be,
could
I
be
don't
one of the accomplices. Yeah.
or somebody who tries to get him out of trouble once he's yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good plot, by the way. What we
Yeah,
just
she was
invented
just
right
I
there.
think the only point of her, honestly, was to make the relationship with Alan less gay. But it was still pretty gay.
Oh, interesting.
It was a
Yeah.
very gay relationship.
Yeah, it super was, and I don't know if 1959 people would read it that way. I have no
The
idea.
gay ones would.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
I also
Um,
think, though, like it was something there to make Alan seem a little early on. It's like the only tell of his kind of skeeziness, because he makes a comment about her looks,
mm,
and that's really the only offhand tip that you
it's
get.
sort of ungentlemanly of him, right?
Yeah, I mean,
That,
and
yeah,
it's subtle, but it's there. So when he has like the heel turn, it's
yeah.
not completely out of nowhere, just mostly out of nowhere.
Wow, that's an excellent point. Yeah, 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 yeah. That actress, by the way, I just want to mention her name is Danielle de Metz. She is French. She is alive. She's 83 and she lives in Los Angeles. So good for her. Yeah,
Man, I
I
wonder.
mean,
I wonder if you could ask her what she thought working on this. Like
it's a
that would
really,
be.
really fun question. Oh man, it would be good. Wouldn't it be great to talk to her and go, "Do you remember at all doing the Fly movie?" And she'd be like, "Oh God, no, it was like 2 weeks of my life in 1959. No,
Well, it depends on if
I."
she's made a lot of movies or not.
Yeah, no, good points. She was in Gidget Goes to Rome, which I did watch again a couple of months ago, and she plays their. She's sort of a guide who Gidget becomes super jealous of. So she got around in that
Clearly,
era.
you need to try to interview her for the podcast.
I know, man. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for bringing this up. I had
That's your
not thought of that.
homework, Jason.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
go
real.
find Danielle de Metz and see if she will do an interview. Oh, what a wonderful idea, right? Yeah. Yes. So this movie is only 80 minutes long. So I think that we can probably wrap it up and talk about our final thoughts, and you can throw in anything that we might not have have mentioned. I really quickly though, I want to mention it's storming all the time in this movie. That's the other thing that it's totally like science fiction double feature, just the sort of thunder just all the time. It's wonderful. I love that. I love that you're down in your lab and it's cracker cracker boom all the time. So all right. So Tony, no, we started with Drew. Sorry, Drew. What are your final thoughts on Return of the Fly?
I fall back to where we started. I think it's a fun 50s monster movie. It holds up just dandy as a prime example of that. I don't think it's as good as the first one. But that's not really not like the first one is so good. Like it's
Mhm.
really kind of hard to stack anything against that. Like where so like the fact that this comes up short doesn't mean it's not without its own charms. And I must stress that. but it works as what I believe what their intentions were. It's a faster, funner, goofier version of this mythology, and it's very entertaining. Is
Thank
that?
you. That was wonderful. Julia, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, we're talking about the body horror. We didn't really talk about the body count, which is all those cops and all the people who get killed at the mortuary. Or
Yes.
at least I think they get killed. Lots of people dying in this movie. So it is pretty, pretty horrific. But I don't know that I was ever scared per se. But I think it was definitely. There's probably a couple of jump scares that were pretty good. I know there was one, and I can't remember where it was now, where I was just like, "Oh, that was a
Oh,
good
well,
jump scare."
there's one where the fly just comes out of the darkness when Sydney Green it's not Sydney Greenstreet, I'm sorry. When it's Dan Seymour comes out of the darkness, or he's in his office and the fly just emerges from
Yeah.
nowhere. And that was a good scare. It really was. Yeah. And he
I
gets
know there
him.
was I know there was at least once when I was like, "Oh my god." Anyway,
Yeah.
but yes, for the most part, not so much scary, but definitely horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think I would have just added, you have minutes to add to this movie. I would have added minutes to the last couple scenes for Vincent Price to have more to do and for it to make more sense that they were able to figure out how the heck to undo the situation that they got themselves into. But it's fun. Like I say, I love the cars. I like the fashion. I like the sets. Some decent performances. So yeah, I think it was definitely not one that is, it's just it's not a bad review. It's just a
No,
few
of
few
course.
things I would fix.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And the funny thing is, you talked about adding stuff, and it just occurred to me that what we do now in Hollywood today, the way you make the ending go longer is they start working on it, and then whatever they try first breaks, and so you got to fix whatever they did wrong, and then go back to what they were trying to do. So if you're trying to stuff the fly into the box so that he can be zapped, maybe he gets away, and you got to chase around
Or you
after him
try
or
to
whatever.
what do they call it? They call it a
The reintegrator. It's a
reintegrate. You
disintegrator,
try to
and then
reintegrate one time and it doesn't work out properly, so you do it again.
right.
There's
So
like some weird thing.
one thing we've
Yeah.
innovated. I use it in quotes because it can be argued. But one thing we've innovated is that Act 3 is longer and more complicated nowadays.
Yeah.
Tony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, talking through it, I mean, perhaps I think I might have enjoyed the discussion more than I like. No, that
No, I'm
sounds
with
more
you.
harsh. That
Yeah.
sounds more harsh than I actually is. I think it's a cool movie. As an adult, definitely though, the all of the interesting parts of The Fly, it's hard to compare this one because it's so rough and just a different style. That doesn't make this bad. But I again I do agree with Drew. Had I seen both back to back when I was much younger, I think
Mhm.
this would be the more memorable one because it had all the monster movie things that I really wanted or enjoyed. But we don't get things. They trade off things like the really suspenseful trying to catch the fly scene and will it or will it not get out of the crack in the window and all of that kind of business.
Yeah.
That's very thriller kind of movie, as opposed to a straight up rock'em sock'em gangster monster movie, which is enjoyable in
Yeah.
itself. Um, and I agree with Julia too, though. I do wish by the time we even get more Vincent Price and not too long after that, he's shot and then incapacitated and left to kind of just be frail in a bed for a while. And you kind of want to go, but you still have Vincent Price, unless
Yeah.
that was the thing of like, because from what Julia said about him being disappointed about the script, it didn't sound like, oh, we only get Vincent Price for a couple days, so he's just going to do it. It sounded like he was perhaps more invested in it,
Mhm.
and that's a shame.
Yeah.
But to its credit, it also has gangsters and monsters,
Yeah.
which is not which is a thing that doesn't happen perhaps as much as it should. It happened in like a couple video games. That was cool, but there aren't that many crossover gangster monster jams, and that would I'd be down with more of that. That's cool. Yeah, I did enjoy it, but in some ways, I wouldn't say it feels like a step down. It feels like a step into just a different area of horror, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's hard to watch back to back now with a just taking it all in. But it's fun. It's definitely enjoyable, and again, it's got some horrific sequences and interesting makeup, and now it launched. I'm just thinking about doing more comic book bits with
Yes,
so
sure.
I never when I was watching it the other night, I never would have thought it would have led me here. But I think it's enjoyable. It's definitely worth checking out. It's just a different flavor for sure.
Yeah. I would add nothing to that other than, I really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to see where the third one is going, because I'm dying to see whether the third one is more like the genteel, sophisticated roots of the first one, or more exploitative monster horror than like the second one.
This is gonna be so good.
Oh, I can't wait. That sounds super fun. So, anyway, it'll be a blast to find out. All right. And also, I liked what Tony said about Aliens 3. This is not so much anymore about Return of the Fly, but it occurs to me, man, when you are starting a sequel and you begin by killing off half the cast so you don't have to deal with them, you do that at your peril. People do not. I mean, I feel like Aliens 3, they hate it the most because Newt was a really great character, but it just feels like you've walked into a turf war between creatives, and that this creative is going, I didn't like what those writers did, so I'm gonna like murder everybody. Yeah, uncool. So, all right, let's get our endorsements. I really I want to hear what you've been watching, listening to, reading, whatever you want. Drew, what's going on?
So because I guess I got the Alligator Blu-ray, I have been watching a lot of rampaging croc
Sweet.
and alligator movies, particularly on Tubi.
Wait,
And there,
does it have the Alligator People? That one that we mentioned? It's okay if it
oh,
doesn't.
that's a good question. I totally see if it does. But I did find two gems that I had not previously seen on Tubi. There's Killer Crocodile and Killer Crocodile 2. They are from the late 80s. They were filmed back to back. The best description of the first one is Jaws meets Scooby-Doo, but replace the shark with a giant radioactive. They are very low budget, so your may vary. I found the crocodile effects to be very charming. This is definitely on the schlocky of things though, so like if you're looking for like a sophisticated horror movie, this is definitely not that, but there's still a lot of fun to be had there. And Tubi has lots of good stuff on it, and this was no exception. The other thing that I have been enjoying is a friend of mine who I am working on a Hangman project with. We were hanging out at Bat City Comics, and he, for whatever reason, I mentioned that I wanted to pick this up. He just went and my friend Paulo just while he was paying for his own comics, he grabbed this for me and bought it for me. But it is IDW IDW collection of all the original black and white Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics.
Oh my goodness.
And
wow.
It's such good stuff, and IDW has done a wonderful job of presenting them. It's got annotations from Kevin Eastman. It's so good. And
those were the best. Those cheap ass Eastman and Laird black and white comics.
They're so
80s.
good. They're so good.
Great.
And I if you're even just like a casual Ninja Turtles fan, or if you're a fan of comic book history, I think that you would get a lot out of this. So I highly recommend picking that up. So that's my twofold endorsement right now.
That's really fantastic. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Julia, what do you have to endorse for us?
Well, I mean, what I have on the brain is any William Hurt movie. We chose The Accidental Tourist in honor of William Hurt, and which was really fun to watch. And then we're watching the new episodes of Picard. So if you're a Star Trek fan, those are especially this one that we just watched. I don't know if it's the most recent one or if there was Is that
Yeah,
the
it's
most
this
recent one?
week's. That's this week's
Yeah,
episode.
it's really good. I really suspenseful. So some good, some old favorite villain characters from the Next Generation. So that's what I've been watching this week.
Fantastic. Thank you. Tony, what do you got?
Let's see. Well, I'm still in just random 2B old school land.
Sweet.
So I did see a definitely not licensed Batwoman 1968, which is up there.
Oh, the Wild Wild World of Batwoman.
No. It's just called Batwoman.
Huh.
And it's like a Batwoman in a bikini style Batwoman costume, but still with the cowl. It's all again, this is stuff that's just like, Tubi goes, hey, you like this stuff, here you go. I go, okay, it's late at night. I've been, when I'm not doing that, I've been playing Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is I know it came out a long time ago, but I finally got around to playing it. Those two those Insomniac Spider-Man games have some of the best Spider-Man stuff in them. And not even just the Spider-Man heroic stuff, but the world building and the human interaction side is almost, I'd watch that put together like Spider-Verse if I could. But I've been playing that and then watching, things like Batwoman and, all manner of, there's several others, but I'm just on a B movie, gritty, schlocky.
So here's you said so I'm real confused about this Batwoman movie you mentioned, because you know that the 1966 Wild World of Batwoman,
yeah,
which was also a ripoff of Batwoman, but you're talking about yet another movie.
Yeah, 1968.
Holy
Batwoman.
crap! I have never heard of
exactly.
this.
See, that's what I'm saying. Is
this is a South American movie? This is from where the hell is this from? It's by a guy named Rene Cardona. Wow.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, this is the kick I've been on. Is like, here's some.
Love it.
You're up late at night. This is everything I want late at night. This is
I love
me.
it. That's fantastic.
I don't know if anybody who listens is in Austin or who who's going to be out and about or feels safe enough to be out and about. I'm still wearing a mask wherever because I want to protect myself and others. But for me, we're also one of our first gig this year, I guess, in the new year, is a huge gig, Stoner Jam, which is Thursday, the 17th, this Thursday, all day, tons of bands, really good, just good friends, good bands I've wanted to see. Anyway, Deserts of Mars is playing that. And we go on at like 3:00, I think it is, or 3:15. Anyway, but it starts at like 1. There's tons of great bands there, and if that's what you want, Stoner Jam 2022, and we were supposed to play Stoner Jam 2020, and everything went down. So it's nice to be back. Like I said, we're playing with cool bands, with cool friends of ours. We have a really tight, high energy set, and I'm stoked to be, part of that. Luckily, Austin's like back at stage 2 right now, so I feel okay being on stage. I still feel a little wary sometimes, whatever, but this was a big deal and a big thing for us to go out and play. So I'm excited about that. If anybody does feel safe enough and wants to go see some live music, it's outside for the most part, so that's also a plus. So, but yeah, that's what I've been watching. Oh, and I also I just found out this Discotheque Media. This is going to be for a very select crew. Discotheque Media had their discotheque day today, and they're like the saviors of old school anime. Like, they put out all the stuff that you're like, I can't believe in my heart of 80s heart that you're putting this out, taking a gamble. They are the people who put out all the stuff that basically I would have never thought would have sold here. When I was much younger, there were, everybody just was shipping. Transformers were big, so they just shipped out model after model from random series that if they didn't do so well in Japan, they just had a backstock. They would just like send them to dollar stores or whatever, various model hobby shops. There was one called Dorvac, and it had cool mech suits and just the weirdest enemy mechs, strange looking thing. But there was a helicopter and a Jeep that they actually took those molds and turned them into Transformers because they were iconic enough. But randomly, I found out Discotheque Days today, and they said, hey, we're releasing Dorvac. So like in my 80s, because we knew nothing about this. Like we didn't get these series during that time. We just
Yeah.
got the model, so you had to make up whatever, and they had cool designs. But you're like, what's a door vac? I mean, you were lucky sometimes if they even had an English logo of a
Yeah.
name that you could pronounce or try to pronounce, right? Like they had Dogram, and you Dogram, what the hell is that? I don't know. But anyway, just found out Discotheque's putting out Doorback later this year, and like 80s, you know, I get to I'm high-fiving myself across time, because as a kid I never would have thought we would get, you know, some random show that did okay in Japan but not well enough to sell, you know, super well. And you know, we got the toys but never the show. So I'm kind of freaking out and stoked about that. I'll get it later on in the year, be able to check it out finally. But you know, thanks to Discotheque, because they just put out so much stuff that I'm just giddy that, you know, there was another one that a Diamos that my brother had the toy and we never knew what the heck it was. They put that out too. So they're definitely the saviors of 80s stuff like that. And I'm super happy that they're doing that. There's a couple other on my list that they put them out. It's exciting times if you live through all that, to finally be able to see these things officially and have a company care about them and actually like remaster them and, you know, resubtitle them, and you know, they're not just bootlegs. That's amazing to me. So, but again, that's kind of a very niche. I don't know how much.
No, but
I don't know how much crossover with our audience there is, but I don't know. This is something so close to my past that I'm just really excited.
Sure. I by the way, I looked up that Batwoman movie. It's a Mexican movie, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest. With the name of the director is Rene Cardona. Yeah, Mexican, 1968. I can't believe I've never seen this movie.
That's what I'm saying. Like, thank you, Tubi, for just
that's
out
fantastic.
there. Like I just love, and again, like I said, its algorithm now has me firmly laser focused on here's some stuff.
Yeah, here's some stuff. What's cool is that's one of those things where the people are flagrantly, back in 68, they're flagrantly like just tripping all over the copyright violation. They don't care.
Sure.
And luckily the work is a work of art, so it survives. And so now in 2022 we don't care about this 1968 copyright violation, and it's kind of neat. So that's pretty great. Very cool. Thank you. I have two things to endorse. One, you know, this also might be fairly geeky, but I'm going to say it anyway. Back in the 80s, after Star Trek 3, the movie, The Search for Spock, DC Comics got Mike Barr, who's a big Batman writer, to do the DC Comics Star Trek series. And their series just had its own continuity. It picked up after Star Trek 3, and Kirk, Spock's dead, so Saavik is on the bridge in Spock's place. They're running around in the Excelsior because I believe because they blew up the Enterprise, and they're just running around, and they get into adventures, and they get into a mirror universe adventure. It was so good, and it was just its own continuity. It just didn't, you know, and in theory they kind of looped it back so it could fit into Star Trek 4 by the time they got there, but it didn't really matter because it's like 3 years for Mike Barr to just write his stuff. And that has been missing from Comixology and all that stuff for years, because who knows why? Because it's the Star Trek license, but DC put it out, and yada yada. But now IDW is releasing it in trade paperback, and I'm so stoked about this. I was just so happy to find out that was going to exist, and it's coming out like this month, so that's really cool. The other one is I learned of a movie called I Start Counting from Woodland's Darkened Days Bewitched. You know, they were just listing these different movies, and they showed a couple snippets of you know, a girl looking across a hedge at a spooky old house. And I Start Counting is not a folk horror movie. It's actually a serial killer movie from 1969, and it is wonderful. It's just it stars Jenny Agutter of American Werewolf London, and it's just about this 14-year-old girl who has a crush on her like 32-year-old cousin, but she also thinks he might be the local serial killer. And it's suspenseful, and it's often funny, and it's really lovely, and it's just this gorgeous 1960s movie that I never would have known about but for that documentary. just sort of mentioning it in passing. But so I Start Counting was so good. And if you want to see Jenny Agutter like when she's like 16 years old, this is her, I think, first big starring role. So
yeah, that documentary is just such a great treasure trove.
I know.
And
It's
also
just
check
one
this out.
recommendation after another, right? Yeah,
amazing.
no, unbelievable. Yeah, this one's not even a full court. That's the crazy thing. It's just this random movie that they mentioned, and I was like, oh, I want to watch that. So yeah, we live in a wondrous time. Okay, so that's our discussion of The Return of the Fly. It was so fun, and I can't wait to be back next week to find out what kind of sophistication the mid 1960s brings to this series. Everybody be excellent to one another. Thank you so much for spending time, and we will talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Right.